Hello, Dark Reader, and welcome to the Dark Side of the Library podcast. I'm your host, Katie. Today we are going to be talking about a book called The Witch in the Well. This is by Camilla Bruce, and it was published by Tor. So I don't know if you guys listened to my previous episode, but I was talking about loot and how I think Tor may not be the place for me to go find books, and this has hammered it in. Tor is not the place for Katie to go find her creepy dark novels. But if you know of a dark novel, and if there's something that you suggest and it just so happens to be published by Tor, feel free to comment, let me know about it, because I still have a lot of hope, and if you think it's good, then it's probably going to be good. So make sure to comment. If you're watching on YouTube, definitely comment on the video. And you can find all of our links to all of these books in our show notes at darksideofthelibrary.com and comment over there as well. So let me move on. We will talk about Camilla Bruce first. So Camilla Bruce is a Norwegian writer of speculative and historical fiction. She does have a master's degree in comparative literature and has co-run a small press that published dark fairy tales, which is really cool. She currently lives in Trondheim with her son and her cat. Let me tell you what the publisher says about this book, what the summary actually is. The Witch in the Well is a dark Norwegian thriller, and Camilla Bruce is the author of You Let Me In, so it's an addition to her creepy, freaky, gothic, atmospheric stories. When two former friends reunite after decades apart, their grudges, flawed ambitions, and shared obsessions swirl into an all-too-real echo of a terrible town legend. Centuries ago, beautiful young Elspeth Clark was accused of witchcraft after several children disappeared. Her acquittal did nothing to stop her fellow townsfolk from drowning her in the well where the missing children were last seen. When author and social media influencer Elena returns to the summer paradise of her youth to get her family's manor house ready to sell, the last thing she expected was connecting with and feeling inspired to write Elspeth's infamous spirit, the very historical figure that her ex-childhood friend Kathy has been diligently researching and writing about for years. What begins as a fiercely competitive sense of ownership over Elspeth and her story soon turns both women's worlds into something more haunted and dangerous than they could ever imagine. Wow, what a sell. Whoever writes these is awesome, because it makes you want to pick up these books. It's similar to what the story is about, but there's so much nuance that they miss here. Let me break this down a little bit further for you. So one thing I want to just mention is that the thing that might have made this book maybe a little better is not listening to the audiobook. So this is a epistolary style-ish writing, so there's a lot of letters, manuscripts, etc. that are kind of integrated through the story. I don't necessarily think it's done well, personally. I know a lot of people think it flowed pretty well, but maybe because I did the audiobook, it just didn't do what maybe it was supposed to. So we have several stories through different character perspectives, through different lenses, etc., different times in history. To me, it ended up being kind of a jumbled mess. There was way less intrigue and mystery and more, oh God, where am I? I did feel a little lost. All right, our main characters in this story are Elena and Kathy. We also have Elspeth, obviously, too. So Elena and Kathy were childhood friends. They grew apart, and they lived in a small Norwegian town called F, literally the letter F. As a kid, Kathy was a loner, so she got into an accident which left her in the hospital for a long time and disabled for a really long time, and kids were nasty because that's what kids do, and they made fun of her. So she would find refuge at this well that was in between Kathy's property and Elena's uncle's property. So Elena would spend summers over there, and they became friends, and they, like summer friends, and then she would leave and come back. Kathy stayed in F, the town. That is a letter. And Elena finally comes back as an adult because her uncle passes away. She is cleaning out his massive manor. And not only that, but Elena is actually a spiritual wellness influencer. And she is pretty well known. She wrote a book, another hit, about self-love and communicating with your soul. But now, for some reason, she wants to expand to Elspeth Clark. She somehow mixes that spiritualism and seances and speaking with the dead to her self-love, spiritual wellness bit to her publisher, and her publisher's like, well, not everybody is into like that much spiritualism. We gotta cap that off a little bit, Elena. That might be a little too much. But Elena's really determined. So Elspeth Clark, she was accused of witchcraft. In the stories, Elspeth will tell in her own words, so some of those manuscripts are actually through Elspeth, and you can tell. And the town assumed that she was a witch, and because all of these children kept disappearing, they assumed that she was the one eating the children, and they would find an item of the child's near a well that was in this woods. And Elspeth swore up and down it was not her. And the town was just done with her. They just targeted her. Stereotypical witch hunt. They're like, I don't like you. So because, I don't know, maybe you're pretty, you're sleeping with somebody I don't want you to sleep with, or you said something nasty to me at church the other day. Targets on her, and they just decided to take matters into their own hands. And even though she was acquitted of all of the charges, they just decided to drown her. They were like, I'm going to do the thing. And it's terrible. It's really awful. They threw her into the same well that they assumed that she was doing. Fair's fair, I guess, to the town. All right, Elena, we're going back to present day-ish. So early in the story, Elena has been found dead. This is an actual spoiler. And Kathy is the prime suspect because Elena and Kathy became rivals because they were both trying to write this book about Elspeth. Now, here is where I'm going to talk more about the things that I did not like. So just so you know, I would probably rate this book about maybe a 1.52 out of 5. I was, again, I was not a huge fan of this book. All right. So both of these characters are insufferable. Elena and Kathy are just so hard to read. It was a slog. And at times I felt just mad at both of them. They are just horrible people. So let's just start with Kathy. She is a martyr. She is angry. She is spiteful. She is jealous. She's just not pleasant to read. Her perspective is just vile. Even if she's totally right in all of this stuff, the way she goes about this is just so nasty. She is just not a nice person. And she is so paranoid. And everything that she is upset about is all in the past. She just cannot let a lot of things go, including like the way that she was treated as a child. She was a very traumatized person, but she needs therapy. Just bottom line, because all of that stuff, that sadness, that loneliness, it all manifested into just this bitter woman. It's hard to feel bad for her. And now she's turned into a martyr. It's awful to read. It really is. I initially was like, wow, what a crappy friend to take this story away. You know, Kathy is the person who really, I mean, she was the one who's a local. She grew up with the well. That was her thing. And she was really obsessed with the story of Elspeth Clark because Elspeth Clark is a martyr too. She was wrongly accused of something and punished, just like Kathy is. So, you know, you get a lot of similar vibes there. But again, it's hard to feel bad for her because Kathy takes it to a higher level. Like, Elspeth is dead. She literally did nothing. And she's dead and she can't fight for herself. Kathy is alive. She's fine. She just can't get over a lot of things. And she needs therapy because she's angry and it's turning her into a villain. All right, Elena. Okay, so you know that trope or that person. Maybe you actually even know somebody like this. I know I have. So it's that spiritual guru person or that person that's just dabbling in yoga or Reiki a little bit. And they also want to be an influencer. They're like, oh, I just feel it being my calling. And, you know, but it's really, bottom line, really self-absorbed. That's Elena. So she is all about this message of self-love and caring about other people and compassion, but she's nasty to Kathy. And she has this big veil where she looks like the good guy. oh, I don't know why Kathy would be so angry at me. We both can write this story where we have different perspectives. We have X, Y, and Z. And she's actually really stuck up because if Elena really actually felt this way, where both of them could write the story, then it would not blow. Like, Kathy could just be her miserable self and just explode herself. But instead, Elena escalates it. The whole thing gets out of hand. It gets ridiculous. And they both blow it up. It just enormously. Elena, too, when you're listening to the audiobook, it's hard to listen to, and I'm sure it's really hard to read, but a lot of her scripts or text or messages or her perspectives, they always end in hashtags. So it's like hashtag self-love, hashtag influencer, hashtag spiritualism, and it's awful. It's really annoying. I hated it. It was terrible. So the only saving grace for the story that made it worth finishing was Elsbeth and her story and the witchy elements and even the demonic bits. But honestly, it just was not enough to save the entire story itself and bring it alive. And honestly, I feel like it should have been way leaned into with Elsbeth. And I'm not going to talk about Elsbeth further because I've already told it to you. But that is some of the best parts of the book, is her perspective, why she was targeted, the aftermath of it all, and how she truly is the pivotal point of the story and why the girls are so obsessed with her. So there are bits of that, and it's a little, I guess, atmospheric, spooky, but those ladies were just, they took all of the, I mean, they're both kind of miserable. So it took that fun, eerie element totally out of the story, because it's like the ghost is trying to be scary, but those two are just fighting all the time. It's like a parody, scary movie or something. The serial killer's coming up, but then the kids end up just killing themselves because they're all pissed at each other. And the serial killer's like, oh, well, you took all the fun out of that. That's kind of what it felt like for me. I'm not entirely sure what Camilla Bruce was trying to do. And I touched on this a little bit with Kathy and Elsbeth, and how Kathy and Elsbeth are both martyrs. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be, if we're talking about an echo of women being targeted, because Kathy gets targeted for Elena's murder, and Elena could be, I guess, one of those, because she's well liked, so she's going to move an audience to one way where she might actually be the person in the wrong, and it's not actually Kathy. And to me, and I'm not sure if the moral of the story is that we should really embrace the sisterhood and not be so mean to each other, because these things still happen today. So, it's hard to gauge what the moral of this book is and what kind of the message is supposed to be, because even the end, it just feels like it just ended. We're done. And I was just not impressed. So again, a bit of a disappointment, because the whole premise of the story sounded interesting. I love the idea of two writers. I love the idea of a creepy ghost witch. In addition, little demon surprises. Of course, those are all things that are great, but I just did not think that this hit the mark for me. So if you are interested in Witch in the Well, I feel like it is a little divided, so maybe you'll enjoy this book. Who knows? This is by Camilla Bruce, and you can find links about Camilla Bruce and this book down in our show notes, so make sure to check that out at Dark Side of the Library. For additional dark reads, you can find more of them on our show notes. We list a whole bunch of books out each week for every single month, from nonfiction, fiction, adult, YA, children's books, and even comic books, because I love comic books. Stay tuned every Wednesday and Friday for a new episode. Make sure to spread this podcast to all of your freaky loved ones. We're hoping that 2023 we see more growth, and make sure to rate and review. We'd love to hear from you guys, and you can join us on our live streams either on YouTube or our Amazon Live channel at amazon.com/live/darksideofthelibrary. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you next time.